All right, hello and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're going to be talking about a topic that I find very interesting, and I hope you do too, because it can literally change your life forever. So what we're going to be talking about today, as you can see from the title, is how to think like a master and the hidden software of the mind. And as you can see from the overview, what we're going to be talking about more specifically is first the overview itself, the power of thought, mental models, heuristics, cognitive biases, and meta thinking. And then finally, the review and your action items for the day or the next few days. So with that being said, let's just get started and talk about the power of thought. So every single result in your life, your bank balance, your body, your relationships, your mood is downstream of how you think, not what you feel, not what you hope, what you think. Thought is the command line of your existence. It's the original code. You can't escape it, and you sure as hell can't outsource it. When you upgrade the way you think, everything else follows, without exception. The reason most people never change their life is because they never change the lens they're using to interpret it. Thought is invisible. It sits behind your eyes, shaping how you see, feel, react, and decide. But because it's invisible, you don't question it. You assume it's accurate, you assume it's you, but it's often, most likely, not. It's just conditioning. It's unconscious, it's inherited from parents, culture, trauma, memes. Until you consciously rewrite it, you're just a puppet with an ego. So most people think they're thinking, but they're really not. They're just running loops, old software, obsolete heuristics, unquestioned assumptions they never built themselves. Intelligence doesn't mean you're a good thinker. In fact, smart people often overthink, rationalize garbage, or build castles of logic on the sand of false premises. Thought is only powerful if it's conscious and clean. And thinking isn't just one thing. It's a whole system. Inputs, filters, patterns, and outputs. If you don't understand the architecture, you'll always be at the mercy of its flaws. You'll confuse feelings for logic, and you'll chase clarity while feeding on confusion. You'll seek truth while getting high on certainty. But if you understand how it all fits together, you get the power back. Thought happens on levels: instinct, reaction, intuition, calculation, reflection, abstraction. Most people never go past level 2. You need to live at level 5 and visit level 6 regularly. Better thinking means tighter distinctions, more precision, fewer assumptions, and you stop lumping everything together and start seeing clearly. And when you see clearly, you move differently. Mental clarity isn't some mystical state. It's a practical result of refining how you process reality. And if you can break things down into their parts, remove distortions, and stay focused on truth, not comfort, you win. The biggest lie you've been sold is that your thoughts are who you are. They're not. They're actually just patterns, they're habits, they're just echoes. But if you never question them, you'll be ruled by them forever. Mastering thought is mastering your internal world. And when you master the internal, the external follows like a shadow. You reclaim your power when you realize you can observe your own thoughts. You can change them. You can interrupt, edit, redirect, and rebuild. That's sovereignty. That's actual freedom. Thought mastery begins with friction. Interrupting the automatic, slowing it down, sitting in the gap between stimulus and response. That space is where all change begins. The people who rise fastest, build the most wealth, influence the most others, and live with the most power aren't the ones with the most resources. They're the ones with the most refined thinking. Strategic, calm, flexible, brutal. They think clearly when others panic. They solve problems while others spiral, and they see 10 moves ahead while others react. Their minds are weapons. In a world drowning in noise, clarity is a superpower. And if you can filter out the noise, kill your biases, and think with ruthless accuracy, you'll dominate every room you enter. Clear thinking also means faster thinking. You won't waste hours looping on useless ideas. You'll cut to the core, make moves, and iterate faster than anyone else. Thinking, actually thinking, is the hardest thing your brain can do. This is why most people don't do it. And you'll realize how most people think later on in this training through something called heuristics, which is not really thinking. Learning how to think is the single highest leverage skill in your entire life. it multiplies the value of every other skill you have. You can be a great speaker, a great marketer, a great athlete, or operator, but if your thinking is reactive, emotional, or clouded, you'll sabotage yourself every time. When your thinking becomes clean, your life becomes clean. You've spent your entire life thinking like the people around you. Family, school, society, social media, all of it is just installed code in your head. You were brainwashed. You didn't consent. You didn't even notice. But now you have a choice. You can either keep running this default code, or you can become the architect, not just of your mind, but of your future. So you're about to learn the real tools, not just quotes, actual weapons, models, shortcuts, corrections. You'll see how the smartest people on earth think, decide, and solve, and you'll learn how to do the same. The next thing you need to internalize is how the best thinkers in the world structure their thinking, because it's not random and it's definitely not emotional. It's systematic. And now it's your turn to install that system. So with that being said, let's talk about mental models. You can't build a strong mind on random thoughts. You need a framework, a skeleton, a scaffolding. That's what mental models are. They're not hacks, they're not facts, they're lenses, ways of seeing the world that let you cut through the noise, reduce complexity, and make sharper decisions faster. The sharper your models, the sharper your moves. Every powerful thinker you admire uses them even if they don't realize it. Most of them do though. Life throws chaos at you. Models compress that chaos into clarity. They give you mental handles. Instead of drowning in data, you pull out one frame and instantly know where to look, what to ask, what to ignore. The brain loves shortcuts, but most shortcuts are sloppy. Mental models are elegant shortcuts, clean, strategic, and repeatable. A good mental model filters what matters and blocks what doesn't. It forces your attention onto what drives results and pulls you away from distraction, noise, or false signals. Thinking doesn't have to be slow. When your models are sharp, you can move fast and stay accurate. You won't just react, you'll anticipate. That's the edge. One model isn't enough. You need a whole toolbox. You need to be able to switch lenses depending on the problem. That's what Charlie Munger meant by a lattice work of mental models. You build a network of thinking tools that cross domains, psychology, math, business, biology, history, and you'll pull from the right one at the right time. That's how you get leverage. Models from outside your niche often unlock more insight than the ones inside it. So borrow from physics, study biology, read ancient philosophy. Most of the world's problems are solved already at the intersection of disciplines. The real magic happens when you stack models, first principles thinking plus inversion, or Occam's razor plus second order thinking. You don't just use them separately, you actually layer them, and that's when your clarity becomes God tier. The more you use them, the more they start to connect. You don't have to force it. Your brain begins to automatically default to a compound clarity instead of linear logic. Stacking models lets you think deeper without actually getting stuck. It keeps your thoughts structured even when the stakes are high or the data is overwhelming. So let's make it real. Say you're launching a product. You can use first principles thinking to strip it down to what actually matters. Then you can use opportunity cost to compare it to every other thing you could build instead. Then you could apply the 80-20 rule to find the one feature that drives most of the value. Then use inversion thinking to imagine why the product launch would fail and then work backwards to prevent it. Same situation, multiple models, massive clarity. A model only works if it helps you act. This isn't about sounding smart. It's about getting better results in less time with less stress. That's why every model must earn its keep. If it doesn't help you move better, think clearer, or decide faster, throw it out. So some mental models are must-haves. They're the foundational ones you use in every domain. These are the ones you want to internalize so deeply that they become automatic. And I've included a few of them here. These are by no means all of them. However, these are some of the most important ones. First principles means breaking something down to the basic truths. What do we know for sure? And you start there. Rebuild from scratch and then don't just accept the default. This is one of Elon Musk's favorite mental models. Second order thinking. Don't just ask what happens next. Ask what happens after that, and then after that, and then after that. Most people make decisions based on the first effect. Winners think through the chain reaction. Now, inversion is one of Alex Hormozy's favorite mental models. at least from what I've seen from his videos, where you basically flip your thinking. Instead of asking, how do I succeed? You ask, would I fail? And then you avoid everything that leads there. It's simple, brutal, and extremely effective. And if I'm not mistaken, Alex Hormozi actually got that one specifically from Charlie Munger. And the next one is opportunity cost, which basically means every yes is 1,000 silent no's. When you choose one path, you're sacrificing every other path. If you're not weighing the cost of not doing something else, you're really not choosing. And then the next one is the 80-20 rule, which is one of the most famous ones, and there's a whole book written about it. Not everything is equal. 20% of inputs drive usually 80% of outputs. Find the lever, push the lever, and then ignore the rest. So don't just read these. Actually drill them, apply them, burn them into your nervous system. The goal isn't to memorize models like trivia. The goal is to live through them. Walk into a meeting and automatically apply second-order thinking. Read a tweet and immediately invert the logic. Face a tough decision and reflexively break it down into first principles. That's the level you want. As your thinking evolves, your relationship to models will also shift. In the beginning, you'll have to pause and consciously apply them. But over time, they become your operating system. You don't even notice you're using them. You just make smarter moves. That's when you know you're operating at a higher tier. Now, the real magic of mental models isn't just in how they sharpen your thinking, it's in how they transfer. They don't stay locked inside a specific domain. You can drag and drop them across disciplines and they still work. That's what makes them so powerful. A model born in physics can unlock problems in finance, and a concept from biology can clarify your marketing strategy. The best thinkers don't specialize in knowledge. They're usually generalists. So for example, take survivorship bias from military history and apply it to advertising. Suddenly, you stop copying the winning ads and start asking what happened to the failing ones. Or another example is bringing feedback loops from systems engineering into your personal development. You realize your habits, inputs, and outcomes form a closed system. The quality of your inputs like sleep, training, reading, and execution feeds back into your performance, which then affects your motivation, which then affects your next set of inputs. You stop treating each habit like an isolated tactic and actually start optimizing the loop as a whole. That's when progress stops being random and starts being inevitable. Now, original thinking isn't really about inventing. It's about recombining. When you collect models from multiple disciplines, you have more ingredients to cook with. You create novel combinations and you see patterns no one else sees. You start to think in ways that feel genius to others, but are just synthesis to you. Most business innovations are just borrowed models in disguise. Uber is marketplace dynamics from economics plus GPS optimization from logistics. Stripe is developer-first thinking from software plus frictionless UX from consumer tech. Big breakthroughs are just elegant collisions. The more models you master across domains, the more clearly you can see the world. You stop being stuck in industry thinking and you stop repeating everyone else's stale solutions. You start creating moves that feel inevitable in hindsight. Mental models are the foundation of understanding. They're the raw materials from which frameworks, systems, and strategies and tactics are built. They're not just useful, they're structural. They are the foundation. You don't get to deep knowledge without them. You don't get to clarity without them. And you sure as hell don't get to originality without stacking them high and wide. Every piece of knowledge is built on something deeper. That deeper thing is usually a mental model. If you can spot it, you can rearrange the whole system and basically see through walls. If you can't, you're just moving furniture inside a house you don't actually understand. As you grow, you'll realize most advice is just the surface layer of a mental model. Skip the surface, learn the structure. That's how you rise. The wider your range of mental models, the more leverage you hold. You're not guessing, you're not copying, you're actually building. Because the deeper your understanding of models, the more dimensions you can operate in. You're not stuck in one lane. You can think across economics, psychology, biology, systems, narrative, and energy. And that kind of range is lethal. You don't need more information. You just need better compression. That's what models give you. They're how you hold complexity in your head without being overwhelmed. They're how you stay strategic when everyone else is scrambling. The game is mental. The edge is cognitive. Models are how you build that edge and keep it sharp no matter what game you're playing, especially now when we live in the knowledge economy. So once you understand how to build thought structures, you also need to learn how to move fast without collapsing that structure, how to make quick, effective decisions under pressure with limited information. There's a science to that too. So with that being said, let's talk about heuristics. So life doesn't give you enough time to think through everything from scratch. You don't get to sit back and map out a 10-step mental model every time someone asks you a question or throws a problem in your face. That's why the mind builds shortcuts. Heuristics are those shortcuts. Fast, dirty, efficient little rules of thumb your brain uses to make decisions in the real world when time, energy, and information are limited. They're not always perfect, but when used correctly, they're your greatest weapon in speed-based environments. You don't live in a lab, you live in chaos. You operate under stress and you make decisions in motion. And under those conditions, perfection isn't the goal. Progress is. Heuristics help you move. They give you fast, good enough answers that let you adapt in real time. You're never going to have all the data. You're never going to be totally sure, but with sharp heuristics, you can still make good calls and win more than you lose. When time is limited, precision thinking slows you down. You don't always have the luxury of depth. That's when you lean on fast, repeatable rules that give you clarity instantly. The more pressure you're under, the more your brain wants shortcuts. If you don't install intentional heuristics, your brain defaults to lazy ones. That's when mistakes happen. So the brain doesn't just like heuristics. It actually needs them. The issue isn't whether you use them, it's whether the ones you're using are helping or sabotaging you. Most people run sloppy, emotional, outdated heuristics, and most people don't even know of a thing called heuristics. They rely on vibes, assumptions, and feelings disguised as logic. That's not thinking, that's autopilot in disguise. Your job is to replace those defaults with sharp, deliberate heuristics that help you make better moves under pressure. If it feels bad, avoid it is a default heuristic. But so is, if it feels hard, lean into it. The first one leads to avoidance. The second, for example, builds strength. Which one you run in the background determines your entire trajectory. You can't upgrade what you don't notice. So start listening to the decisions you make quickly and ask yourself what rule your brain just used. Where did it come from? And is it helping or not? And if not, kill it. The best heuristics are the ones you build yourself. You take a pattern you've seen play out over and over and then compress it into a principle and carry it in your back pocket for when it counts. The more experience you have, the more refined your heuristics become. And the more you reflect on your mistakes, the sharper they get. So heuristics are living tools. You don't set them once and leave them. You test, observe, adjust, and keep making them better. The tighter the loop, the more reliable the outcome. Another word for heuristics that you could use is principles. And what you could do technically is find the principles of very successful people online. For example, Naval is one of those people that basically post their principles and mental models and his rules of thumb on his Twitter account or X, whatever you want to call it. So a good heuristic collapses complexity into a single phrase or rule, something short enough to remember, but dense enough to guide your actions. It's a cheat code you earned by paying attention. There are many kinds of heuristics, each designed for different decision types. So to break down a few that actually work in the real world. So the first one, for example, is the 80% rule, which is if you're 80% sure, just move. You don't need to wait to be sure 100%. Momentum beats certainty. If you hesitate past 80%, you're not being cautious, you're actually being afraid. Another one is the fastest path heuristic. Basically, ask yourself what gets me the result with the fewest steps. Don't confuse effort with value. Most people choose complexity to feel smart. You should choose simplicity to stay free. The next one is hard first, which is do the hardest part of the task first. And if you leave it for last, your brain will loop it in the background and drain your energy all day. Hit it first and then the rest becomes light work. Another one is the 2-minute rule, which is if it takes less than 2 minutes, do it now. Don't track it, don't delay it, just clear it and keep moving. This one alone can save you hours every week. So those are just some examples of heuristics you can use, and you can look online for more. There's plenty of them. But no heuristic is universal. What works in one domain might fail in another. They're not like mental models. Your job is to know the domain you're in. Are you optimizing for speed? Are you optimizing for safety? Are you optimizing for innovation? Once you know that, you can choose the heuristic that matches the terrain. Blindly applying rules is just another form of mental laziness. Every heuristic is a tool, so don't use a hammer when you need a scalpel. Don't apply an act fast rule when the cost of error is life-changing. Know the difference. Heuristics work even better when you stack 2 or 3. For example, do the hard thing first plus stop at 80% certainty equals ruthless progress in almost any workday. Now, heuristics and biases are cousins. They come from the same place, your brain trying to make decisions faster. The difference is that heuristics can serve you when conscious. Biases run you when unconscious. If you don't take control of your heuristics, they turn into blind spots, into biases. You need to know when your shortcuts are helping and when they're hurting. One of the fastest ways to fix bad thinking is to spot where a good heuristic has been warped into a bias, then replace it with a sharper version. This is the link between fast thinking and clean thinking. You already have heuristics. Now you know how to refine them, you know how to break the bad ones, replace them with better ones, and build fast-moving thinking that actually works in real life. But to really master this, you need to see what happens when those heuristics go wrong, when your shortcuts get hijacked, twisted, and used against you. And that's what we're going to be digging into next. So let's talk about cognitive biases. So most of the time, your brain doesn't see reality as it is. It sees it as it wants it to be, or as it's been trained to see it. And unless you're actively countering that distortion, you're living inside a funhouse mirror. Cognitive biases are mental glitches, flaws in perception, judgment, and memory. They're shortcuts gone sideways. They're your brain trying to help you survive, but instead making you lie to yourself without even realizing it. If you don't learn to spot them, they will sabotage every decision you make. So, this isn't theory. Biases are why you chase the wrong people, double down on bad investments, ignore red flags, misjudge others, and stay stuck in fake problems and tell yourself convincing stories that aren't remotely true. They corrupt the entire system. It doesn't matter how good your logic is if your inputs are actually distorted. If your perception is broken, your conclusions are most likely broken too. So, for example, you see a tweet from someone with 100,000 followers and assume they must be right. That's actually authority bias. You dismiss an opportunity because it didn't work last time. That's recency bias. You cling to a bad idea because you've already spent 3 months on it. That's the sunk cost fallacy. These glitches aren't rare. They're happening all the time without you even realizing. And they're subtle, and you can't brute force your way past them. You need awareness, precision, and constant recalibration. But biases aren't necessarily evil. They evolved for a reason. Your brain had to make fast judgments to survive. Back when you were being chased by predators or trying not to eat poisonous berries, shortcuts made sense. They still do sometimes, but in today's world, they usually make you weak, reactive, and blind. That's not survival, that's self-sabotage. Your brain trades accuracy for efficiency because thinking is actually hard. It will give you a fast answer that feels true over a slow one that actually is true. It doesn't care about truth, it cares about safety. That's why most biases feel emotionally comfortable. They confirm your beliefs, soothe your fears, or reinforce your ego. Now, the problem isn't just that biases exist, it's that you don't know when they're happening. That's why they're dangerous. They don't announce themselves, they don't ask permission, they just literally slide into your perception and warp it from the inside, and you don't even realize it. The only defense is awareness. Ruthless, structured awareness. Most people only catch their biases in hindsight, if at all. You need to get ahead of them. Know the patterns, know when you're most vulnerable, and know which ones hit you hardest. Build your own internal tripwires. And there are dozens of cognitive biases, but some show up more than others, especially in business, relationships, and decision making. These are the ones you need to tattoo on your brain and start catching in the wild. One of them is confirmation bias. You only look for evidence that proves what you already believe, and you ignore, dismiss, or rationalize anything that actually challenges it. And this is the root of most intellectual laziness. If you don't question it daily, you become a prisoner of your own assumptions. Another one is the sunk cost fallacy. You keep investing time, energy, or money into something just because you've already put a lot in, even when it's clearly failing. You forget that the past is gone and that doubling down doesn't recover your losses. It deepens them. Another one is anchoring. Your brain fixates on the first piece of information it sees, and every judgment afterward gets distorted by that anchor. Whether it's a price, an idea, or a first impression, you stop seeing clearly after the first data point. This is used extensively in supermarkets, for example. Now, the next one is availability bias. If it's easier to remember, you assume it must be more likely, more common, or more true. This makes you overestimate risks that are vivid and underestimate risks that are invisible. Fear loves this one. The next one is the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is incompetent people overestimate their skill, experts underestimate theirs. The less you know, the more confident you feel. The more you learn, the humbler you become. If you're feeling too sure, you might be deep in this one. Now, you can't eliminate bias completely, but you can reduce its power. You can build mental systems that flag it, question it, and override it when necessary. The goal isn't perfection, it's correction. Faster, sharper correction each time. Ask yourself, what would I think if the opposite were true? Or what would someone who disagrees with me say? Or am I resisting this because it's wrong or because it's uncomfortable? These are the kinds of questions that actually puncture bias. When you speak your thinking out loud or write it down, it's easier to catch distortions. Bias hides in the dark. Drag it into the light and it starts falling apart. The fastest way to spot bias is through friction with reality. Results don't lie. If your model keeps failing, your heuristics aren't landing, or your emotions are louder than your logic, then bias is in the driver's seat. Use reality as your calibration tool. Don't just double down on broken thinking. That's the trap. Drop your pride, update your perception, and upgrade your input stream. The faster you can admit that you're wrong, the more right you become over time. You will fall for your biases. The key is how fast you recover, how fast you correct, and how fast you recenter. That's what separates a reactive thinker from a strategic one. You're not here to be flawless, you're here to be fluid. See, adjust, and then move. When you can see your bias while it's happening, not after, it changes everything. You catch yourself justifying a weak move, you pause before clinging to a bad decision, and you notice when you're just trying to protect your ego. That pause is gold. That pause is power. And what you do inside that pause will define your outcomes more than anything else. Now that you've seen how your thinking can break, you're ready to learn how to rise above the breakage, how to step outside the system entirely and observe the game from above and become the thinker who watches thought itself. So let's talk about meta thinking. Now, this is where it basically gets real. This is the layer above all other layers. You've built models, you've installed heuristics or caught the bad heuristics you use. You've caught your biases, but now you need to watch yourself actually thinking. This is meta thinking. It's thinking about thinking. It's the rarest form of cognitive control and the most powerful. Is the difference between a mind that's reactive and a mind that's sovereign. You don't just use your thoughts, you actually watch them, you shape them, and you direct them like a craftsman with his tools. Most people get caught inside their thinking. It's like being stuck in a dream. They don't realize there's a part of them that can step back and actually observe. But that's where the shift happens. The moment you become the observer, not just the participant, your entire mental life opens up. You see thoughts as tools, not truths, not identities, just passing mechanisms. And when you practice meta thinking, you create a gap between stimulus and response. Instead of reacting blindly, you pause, you evaluate the shape of your thoughts, and you don't just have them, you actually interrogate them. Is this thought helpful? Is it accurate? Where does it lead? In that gap, you gain real power. The power to not believe every thought. The power to choose a better one. The power to rewrite your narrative on the spot. That's what makes you untouchable under pressure. So meta thinking is recursive. It loops upwards. You don't just think about the thought, you think about how you're thinking it. What model are you using? What heuristic is guiding you? What bias might be distorting this lens? Every layer you observe reveals another, and every loop upward sharpens you. The more recursive your awareness becomes, the clearer your decisions get. It stops being about the surface problem and becomes about the structure underneath. You start solving the system, not just the symptom. So this is where you escape surface level intelligence. You stop chasing answers and start actually upgrading your approach to answers. You stop being the chess piece and start being the chess player. One of the core skills in meta thinking is reframing. You change the meaning of a thought by looking at it from a different vantage point. You don't just react, you reassign the frame. And this turns problems into puzzles, triggers into training, and chaos into code. Say you catch yourself thinking, I can't do this. A reactive mind would try to force motivation. A meta thinker would pause, notice the pattern, and ask, where is that coming from? They'd reframe it to, what would I need to believe to make this feel possible? You realize that meaning is not baked into events. It's assigned by thoughts, and thoughts are flexible. So your entire life becomes flexible. You become unshakable because you control the frame. And if you've watched any of my other videos, you would know that your identity is just the story that you repeat to yourself. And meta thinking lets you rewrite that story in real time. You catch the voice in your head telling you who you are, and you actually override it. You choose better language and you install more empowering scripts, and you move from victim to author. You stop blindly believing I'm not disciplined or I always mess things up. You catch it, you challenge it, you flip it into something actually useful. I haven't been disciplined yet, but that changes now. This isn't positive thinking, it's just strategic editing. If you don't write the script, someone else will. Your parents, your friends, your trauma, your fears. Meta thinking hands you the pen. If you catch yourself looping, that's your sign. Overthinking, obsessing, rehashing, all signs that your mind is spinning without traction. Meta thinking breaks the loop and it says, this thought has repeated 5 times. That's not insight, it's inertia. And you pull back, you zoom out, and you can switch tracks. Say you're replaying a conversation in your head again and again and again. You pause, you ask, is this useful? Is it solving something? Or am I just spiraling? You don't push through it, you actually redirect yourself. There are models within this too. One of them is observer to actor. Another is above the line versus below the line, or trigger to thought, to emotion, to behavior. These let you trace the chain. You don't just feel off, you pinpoint where in the loop the distortion starts and you fix it at the root. When you're above the line, you're conscious, curious, creative. When you're below the line, you're reactive, closed, and triggered. Meta thinking is the lever that moves you back above. That's the real skill, tracing the loop. Thought leads to feeling, feeling leads to action. So if you catch it early, you can change the outcome before it locks in. So you probably brush your teeth daily. But when's the last time you actually cleaned your thinking? Meta thinking is mental hygiene. You scrub your beliefs, you clear the fog, and you detox your self-talk, and you disinfect the lies. Left uncleaned, the mind rots, so don't let it rot. Run regular audits. What am I thinking on loop? Where am I stuck? What belief keeps resurfacing? You don't need a crisis to clean, you just need attention. So once you've cleaned it, maintain it, just like physical training. Consistency beats intensity. 5 minutes a day of mental recalibration can outperform 5 hours of reacting like a headless chicken. So at its highest level, meta thinking moves from control to intuition. You stop just managing thought, you transcend it. You drop into pure presence. You feel the answer without overthinking it. But you only earn that level after mastering all the ones below. Stillness is not passive. It's what lives on the far side of extreme mental discipline. Now, you're not just building a better brain, you're becoming a better being. One who sees clearly, moves decisively, thinks above the noise, and leads their life with awareness and knowledge. So with that being said, let's talk about the review and your action items for the next few days. So we covered the overview, we covered the power of thought, we talked about mental models, heuristics, cognitive biases, meta thinking. We're at the review right now. And finally, your action items for the day or the next few days. First, collect mental models through studying, create heuristics that actually help you, and beware of cognitive biases that distort how you see and decide. Stack useful patterns, break useless ones, and take control of the software that runs your brain. The next one would be to start tracking your thoughts like a strategist. Where do your beliefs come from? What patterns are repeating? which thoughts serve you and which ones sabotage you. Map the mental terrain so you can move through it with precision. Then the final one is set aside 5 minutes a day to step outside your mind and watch it. Observe how you're thinking, not just what you're thinking. Actually interrupt the loops, rewrite the scripts, and elevate your awareness until meta thinking becomes your baseline. So with that being said, I find this topic and this subject very, very fascinating, and I hope you did as well. And if you did, let me know in the comments. Make sure to subscribe and hit the like button, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you for being here.